It is on. It is on. Normally my last but it keeps showing up.
And we are live to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
All right, test. Does this work? Does it sound like it works? Somewhat. I'll yell really loud. I can be loud. Hey everyone, welcome to Raleigh SEO Meetup. I'm Patrick. I'm your host for the night. I don't usually do this, but Frank is filling in doing video, so I am up here. I want to thank first our sponsors, Raleigh SEO Conference, Look to the Right, Hive Digital, Reunion Marketing, Deep Pro, Ecom Integrate, Windswept, Rent Ranger, and Opsis Marketing. Tonight we have Jake Bohall. I didn't get Jake's title before this, because again, I'm bad at this. But he can introduce himself when he gets up here. We also have a member directory if y'all want to add yourself. This is where like leads go and also like how we know, basically who's around. It is bit.ly/2019 SEO Meetup. We can send that in an email later. We also have Internet Summit discount code if anyone is going to that. The discount is $50. It is RAL SEO. And we will send that in emails also. Next month we have email marketing as our topic, and just one other thing, a couple events coming up tomorrow night. Mark Trapagan, the guy that's running to the back of the room, will be speaking at your SEO meetup out at Linwood Brewing Concern, and then we have Simon Hesseltine at Triangle Marketing Club next Tuesday. And with that, I think that's all the announcements, so I'm going to hand this over to Jake.
Thank you. That round of applause is for you, buddy. You did a great job. How's it going, everyone? Good? Great. Hey, Jeff. My name is Jake Bohall. I am co-founder at Hive Digital. We're a digital marketing agency located here in the Triangle area. We try to focus on companies we feel are making a positive impact in the world. I started there, actually in 2006 I was a client, and then somehow failed my startup. Actually, it was quite obvious it was miserable. So I failed my startup, and then Hive Digital hired me to help with customer service and like building out strategy for the company as a whole. And then probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I took over as the head of SEO at Hive Digital, and my mentor, Russ Jones, went to go work at Moz. So I've been practicing for, I think, about 10, 12 years, something like that. And through all of this time, I think every year we have SEO is dead. And not necessarily that meetup year, but kind of that discussion where somebody decides to be provocative and makes comments about how SEO is dead. And then everybody's client scrambles to contact their SEO and say, why am I paying you? The strategy doesn't work anymore. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things and trends that we've seen that might lead people to believe that SEO is dead, and then have this amazing conclusion where we rule it dead or alive. Work with Hive Digital. So first off, I think it's important that we think about what are the goals for SEO. So before we start declaring something alive or dead, we need to kind of think about why is it that we do this thing. So just off the top of my head as well, we do SEO because clients want to get traffic, they want to make money, they want to get more brand exposure. But ultimately, I think when we define SEO, it's about helping visitors most efficiently discover your content when they're searching for something that you have to offer. So search engines can be any type of search engine, in my opinion. It can be Amazon, it can be YouTube, it can be Google, it can be Alexa. Any of these types of apps in which a user engages to seek out information, there's an opportunity for SEOs of varying types to get involved and help their clients get more exposure. So a lot of this started, there was a survey that was done. Which SEO myth do you hear most often and most wish would die? 41% said we hear SEO is dead. Interesting, a large number of them also heard SEO is a scam, buying Adwords helps rank, and then social media helps rank. So those are the top 4 items. Yeah, top 4 items that SEO, so I wish this would go away. And not because they think that they're accurate, because these are wrong, and we want it to go away. So to start, this event is for you. I do want to give a shout out and a thank you to the Raleigh SEO meetup for having me speak. This is the first time I've spoken at a Raleigh SEO meetup. Generally, I hide in the corner because this group of people are my peers, and I would say a good portion of the people here are much smarter than I am. So for fear of embarrassment, I tend to avoid presenting here. So it's funny for me, maybe not for you. So just as a quick show of hands, how many people are with an agency? SEO agency, okay, fair amount. How many are savvy with SEO? Okay. The ones who aren't in an agency, are you in-house? Or are you not doing SEO at all? Actually, we'll do that. How many people don't do SEO at all and here to learn about it? Awesome, kudos to you, thank you. Fantastic. So just to put a couple of people on the spot, I'd like to know just why you're here. So why are you here tonight? With a title like SEO is Dead, what brought you here?
So I have an entrepreneurial edtech company. We do reasonably well with content and SEO, but I want to kind of see the next level.
Okay. How about somebody, you said you weren't familiar with SEO.
I'm familiar with SEO, but I want to now do 1, 2, and 3. Get traffic, make money, brand experience.
Yeah, all right. Well, if SEO is dead, you're not going to be able to do any of those things, for what it's worth.
We're going to lay on of hands and revive it.
There we go. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, yeah.
So I can go back and blow up my team and be like, here's all the things you need to execute now.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to cover all of that. All right, anybody else want to volunteer while they're here today? No? Okay. Jeff's here because I made him. Thank you, Jeff. So a couple of concepts that we need to be mindful of is how much search is out there. We see trends and graphs that show that search volume in Google is declining. The one big caveat that you often see with that is that the search volume that gets reported is not inclusive of app data, so like the Google app and how many searches are occurring on the app in mobile, which obviously is quite prolific for Android devices. Then it also doesn't include the shift that often occurs, like for example, we've seen with consumers where a lot of times if you're searching for a product, instead of searching in Google, a lot more of those searches are occurring directly on Amazon.com. So while the data shows that search volume on Google.com is declining, without any data, I would posit that the search volume likely is not decreasing. It's more likely being shifted into other search engines and other types of traffic that aren't being tracked in that same metric. A couple of other concepts, when we see that there is a search volume, declining or not, the search volume does exist. And more web pages are being created constantly. So in the search landscape, more demand or more competition is being created. So every time a new website is created, there's still 10 and potentially shrinking number of organic results that show up on the first page, which means that space is also getting more competitive, which my opinion and what I see in my books as an SEO agency that's getting increased demand, more competition in that space means more companies are seeking out how do we do a better job of fighting for these smaller number of opportunities to reach our audience. And this kind of shows some of the other search engines. So as an example, we can see here, like DuckDuckGo as a search engine is also climbing. So there's also, this kind of just portrays some of that transition that we're seeing where search traffic could be moving into other places. And a couple other quick facts. Desktop search clicks and zero-click searches. This was a blog post that was done by SparkToro, I think, a couple months ago, maybe more recent, in which they evaluated jump shot data. How many of you are familiar with jump shot? Okay. So jump shot essentially uses clickstream traffic, and they collect their data through things like browser toolbars and extensions and things like that to get an idea of where people are clicking, where they're going, what websites they're going to. So some of the cool things we get with jump shot data is I can look up and see for all of the people who came to my website, where did they tend to go to afterwards? And you can start to see like if they leave my site and they go to Mark's agency's website all the time, then I can start to make the assumption that I must suck compared to him, or that I'm not delivering something on my website that people are likely discovering on his. Now, one of the things that JumpShot does with all this data is we can see things like click-through rate, because they have the ability to have some insight into where people are clicking in the browsers. And so they start to look at this is a percentage of clicks for organic, so the organic click-through rate. This is the number of people who performed a search in Google organic and then clicked on a result. And so you can see in January of 2016, about 64% of people who did a search in Google clicked on one of the organic results, and about 4% of those people clicked on a paid, like AdWords text ad in results. And then about 31, almost 32% didn't click on anything. Now they may have gone to refine their query, they may have found what they were looking for and just moved on because of things like search features, or like maybe the answers in a meta description. They could have been searching for the time in another time zone, or doing a math equation. Some of those types of things which have been pretty standard in search results. And we can see over time the organic click-through rate, and again this is just on desktop, went from 64% to 59%, which is apparently a large enough decrease in people clicking that we can start to proclaim that SEO has officially died. 60% of the traffic just is not worth it. We can also see that the percentage of zero click through June 2019 was at 33.7, which was also an increase. So in this case, more people are not clicking on results, less people are clicking on organic, and then you can see that this really nice number that I'm sure Google loves down here, where about 7% are clicking on the ads. It's a pretty fair argument to make that Google's revenue is generated from ads, so there's probably some optimization that they're doing to try to get people to click on more ads. If we look in mobile, it's a bit more drastic of a change. So we can see the zero-click results in a mobile device went from 55% to 61%. So more than half of the queries that are conducted result in nobody clicking on a search result. And then we can see that the click-through rate for organic went from 41% all the way down to less than 27%, which is pretty significant, especially when you're considering that mobile is taking on an increasing market share for the search volume that actually exists. And then again, we can see that paid is certainly doing very well, and having moved from 3% of those clicks to nearly 11.5%. So zero clicks are climbing, organic click-through rate is tanking, paid click-through rate is climbing. It seems at the surface this is a really good case for why you should dump SEO altogether and put all of your money in paid search. Agreed? Agreed? No? Nobody agrees? You're going to be an easy crowd to convince. For a lot of people, they see this SEO is dead, it's the end of the world. For them, I feel fine. When we're looking at the actual, paid, this is the overall average for desktop and mobile. We can see a little over 50% are zero clicks, 4 and some change, 4.5 is paid, and still 45%. For me, one of the things I found interesting was, to declare that SEO is dead at 50% and that we should start investing more in paid, which is at 4%, is like saying that Google Chrome is dying and that we should put all of our eggs in Mozilla Firefox, which has about 4% of the market share there as well. And it's a pretty significant claim to make. Now, when we're talking about the zero-click results, one of the largest influencers for that has been the increase that we've seen in search features. So this is a comparison. This is also JumpShot data, looking at some of the search features. Actually, this is JumpShot data. They actually think they pulled this from Moz, from the Mozcast API, or the Mozcast tool, which shows search features at any given time. You can see what percentage of queries include that feature and that sort of thing. So we can see like HTTPS went from 25% to 94%, probably has no impact on zero click. This, people also ask in knowledge panel, reviews, the local search results, so like getting the location directly in the search result, or seeing reviews there on the side of the knowledge panel. What is XYZ company, and then you've got who the founders are, when they were founded, their revenue, their stock ticker, and you get all this information on the side. obviously there's not a big reason that you're going to necessarily click through on an organic search result for those types of queries. Featured snippets is one of the biggest ones, which is when you start to see that little box across the top in the search results that has the answer in it for you. Went from 5% of queries to 16% of queries. So a larger portion of queries now have a feature that generally doesn't entice a user to click through. Most SEOs, if we're going through and we're optimizing our featured snippets, we might include calls to action and things like that in the text that we know is getting pulled into that featured snippet. But generally those snippets are Google just extracting a piece of content from the page and displaying it, and they do a fairly decent job of showing the actual search results. This has also had an impact on businesses, like some of my clients. I have a client that is a bank, and they have, up until about 2 years ago, they thoroughly enjoyed ranking on the front page for bank account, which if you do a search for bank account, you can see some ads up there for banks, and then you see this song with some lyrics and some info about the album, and then you see some videos about that album, and then like after getting through all of that, you finally start to see that I think there's like 3 banks, the last I checked, that were actually showing up in search results for this. So there are times when, as a business, you need to evaluate some of these and be like, I'm not getting any clicks from this query anymore because I'm not necessarily relevant in the way that Google is expecting. And in a case like this, it's time for us to focus a little bit on a different keyword. In fact, one of the things, I don't know if it's at the top of the screenshot, no, I think maybe it's only on desktop. There's actually a link at the top that says bank account, and then there's like in parentheses, it's like financial or something like that. And you click on it, and then you get the results for what are actual like bank account bank listings. Now, this is sometimes a bit controversial, and I don't think I've showed this data before. Advanced web ranking, it's a tool where you can track your rankings for keywords. They generally pull, at least now, they pull your Search Console data and track your rankings over time for specific keyword phrases. I don't actually use the tool, but I love the data that they have. So one of the things they started like 4 or 5 years ago was pulling the data from Search Console and giving the new click-through rate curves. So many years ago, AOL accidentally leaked some data that showed what the average click-through rate was for a website in position 1 versus position 2, 3, 4, and so forth, which was really helpful because as SEOs, we would start to use that to calculate what we think the ROI would be for ranking for a particular term. So if we knew that bank account had search volume of 100,000 searches a month, and that roughly 35% of people on a desktop are going to click through to that keyword, I have a decent argument like, oh, we're going to get 35,000 new visitors, our conversion rate is X. If we could just rank #1 for this keyword, here's how much money that you could make. And so we love the click-through rate data. For today, the goal here is to kind of show this is what that click-through rate curve looked like in July of 2016. Now, this data also excludes any keyword phrase that had less than 50 impressions on it. And that was done intentionally because a large portion of the queries that Google sees and a large number of the queries for which your site will probably rank are long-tail queries or queries that have never even been seen before by Google. And so when we're looking at click-through rate and trying to determine what type of impact or changes may be happening in the search results, it's best if we kind of filter down to those keywords that actually get enough volume that it would be having an impact. So for the sake of this comparison, I looked at the average click-through rate in July of 2016 compared to the click-through rate in July of 2018. So you can see here, the blue line is desktop and the red line is mobile. So desktop was at like 34, mobile's at 25. If we look, desktop actually in July 2018 went up a little bit, and mobile stayed about the same. If we look at 2019, we can see desktop creeped up a little bit more, so it's a bit like almost to 35, and mobile is over 25%, and that's in the #1 position. There's a couple of other interesting. If you look at like at the graph in this area, you can see that the click-through rates also increased in positions 2 and 3, and then interestingly, we see specifically on mobile, we start to see this big spike around position 5. which is a threshold, like when you're scrolling on a mobile device, kind of like where those breakpoints are. If there's no ads, then you typically get like 5 results. So from what I can see here, despite some of the search feature changes that have gone into play, when you're looking at keywords that receive enough impression share, the click-through rate's actually not changing a whole lot inside of the individual queries. And we also took a look here, specifically if we're looking at informational or commercial keywords. I pulled that bucket out separately. It was something that Advanced Web Ranking had available. They bucketed all keywords as commercial if they had things in it like buy, purchase, discount, coupons, that sort of stuff, pricing and so forth. And they defined it as informational if it had some query phrases like what, when, where, and that type of thing, like how. They did restaurant, hotel, and flight just because most of the time when people are searching for those types of things, they're doing research and it's more on the informational side. So looking at those types of queries, we can see this is just between July 2018 and July 2019. There's a bit of a decline in the commercial space on click-through rate, but for informational, there is a basically static or maybe a slight increase. So even though these changes have been happening in the search results, interestingly, there doesn't seem to be a significant impact on the click-through rates for rankings in specific organic positions. And so I found that quite interesting and quite telling as to if SEO were dying, like our fear is like, oh, there's so many more paid ads, less people are clicking on the paid ads. And we can see that in the global data, like that was like a 2% shift in that. But when you start to get more granular and looking specifically at keywords that have higher volume, there's not a significant change in that curve. So it's pretty easy for SEOs to start getting tunnel vision on the different types of data and to feel like the world is smaller for SEO and the landscape is shrinking. And sometimes it actually is. Like, for example, the number of results on a search page sometimes is like 6, where it was 10. So as an SEO, like ranking in position 8 and 9 was always a great feeling because I was on the front page. Sometimes it's not even on the front page anymore. So, when Frank asked me to talk about how SEO is dead, I laughed and we sort of bantered for a little bit, and I immediately started thinking about how funny it is that SEO is a process. Like, it's a thing that you do, right? It's not an object. And so things like a record player or what is that thing? It's a payphone. If you don't know what it is, my child wouldn't know what that is. Those things died. They went away. It was a process. It was a tool that you used for communicating. It was a tool that you used to listen to music. Train, like a steam engine. It was a tool that you used for transportation. Those things are gone. VHS tapes, those are gone. We still watch movies. We still listen to music. I still got VHS. You still have VHS. I do too. They're really good for kids. But generally speaking, okay, Mark. Good point. The main concept here being that SEO is not an object, it is a process. And in much the same way that music or telephones, like all of these different things, like there are tools that you use to access what you're trying to accomplish. And those tools come and go, and as time moves on, it transforms into something different, like a cell phone or Sirius XM. But we still do the thing that it was meant to accomplish in the beginning. So there's a lot of features and elements in SEO that have come and gone over the years. And I'm sure many of them will change, and SEO as a whole is going to morph in how we do that and what those processes are. But SEO, I would make the statement, is more likely to be immortal, because as humans, we're always going to be seeking new information. We're always going to be looking for it in a specific place. We may change that from Google to DuckDuckGo to Amazon to my car or my refrigerator, that I'm asking for these things, but there's still going to be an algorithm in place that dictates what results that I get back. And there's always going to be someone making money from that. And as long as somebody makes money from the result that I get, there's another person that's going to be willing to pay money to try to take that positioning. So, SEO is a process. So there's a couple of things that, at the base, the core of SEO, I find to be fundamental. So the first is the foundation of crawling and discovery. So one thing that will never change is that regardless of what search engine it may be, whether it's Amazon search engine, crawling, the products that you have, or identifying, trying to surface the products in their search engine, whether it's Googlebot trying to discover the pages on your site, whether it's the App Store trying to surface this cool app that you just built so that someone can install it, or an Alexa skill, or whatever it may be, at the core of all of that is going to be that the search engine is capable of finding and discovering whatever content it is that you as a content owner are trying to surface. There is always going to be content and relevance that factor into this. So once the search engine has discovered this content, they're going to need to categorize it in some capacity. So making sure that there's a link between the content that you're creating and the intent of the user is going to be a process that SEOs will always have to implement. That process may change. Like 10 years ago, if I wanted a search engine like Google to know that this page was about, fabric walls, I would just put fabric walls on the page 100 times. So like Google would know this page is most definitely relevant to fabric walls because it has all of this content on it. Today, we're doing things like using Market Muse's tool and a couple other platforms to try to identify what is topically relevant. If I'm talking about a fabric wall, I probably should be talking about noise cancellation, acoustics, and these other types of concepts which bolster the relevance for my page about a concept or a topic, and in identifying like what is the intent of this page versus what the content has to offer and the user is looking for. And then lastly is links and authority. So every algorithm is going to have to be able to discover a data set to crawl and traverse. They're going to have to be able to analyze that data and identify how is it relevant and how does it match to a query or the intent of a particular user. And then lastly is going to be how do we rank this? So like what is the authority metric that we use in order to calculate which one shows up first? Now it may be that authority metric is that content is deemed to be more relevant, but assuming that you could always have two pages that are equally relevant, there has to be a distinguishing factor, and that's going to be the authority. At the present, that's generally off-site strategy. So it may be link development, it may be reviews and citations and mentions of your brand. There is actually, I think I have a slide for it. I believe it was one of the founders of Google had said that anybody who wins like a Nobel Prize has like 10,000 citations across other documents. And it's just like it's a given. Like if they're gonna win this prize, they're cited in all these other resources at least 10,000 times. And then naturally, if somebody is cited more often in other works of research, then they're probably can be trusted to be an authority. And that was kind of the impetus for why links worked as well as they did, because it was a citation that acted kind of like a vote for your particular website. So establishing brand dominance to show that this content that you have is better than everybody else is a core facet of a ranking algorithm for search, and it's going to be another aspect that we always have to focus on as SEOs. Now, when I started putting this deck together, I was planning to do a coroner's report in which I went through all of the SEO strategies that have died and talked about like, this is when we started keyword stuffing, and this is when we realized that it was most definitely a bad idea. That proved to be a significant amount of work, so I shortened it a little bit and tried to cover a couple of concepts here. Yes?
Can you go back one slide?
Yeah, absolutely.
The links and authority is of offsite SEO. What do you mean by offsite?
Offsite meaning that those are supposed to be factors that you don't influence, right? So it's like a third-party representation of like what type of authority you have or how well that you can be trusted. So it's like there's kind of like this recent thing going about where Google is saying that if you have a self-serving review on your website, they're not going to count it and they're not going to give you star ratings and things like that. So like you can't be a testament to how smart you are Like other people have to say that you're smart before it can be trusted. And so offsite factors, like even like link building, like classic PageRank, the idea wasn't that SEOs would go out there and start building tons of spam links pointing back to our sites in order to fake how popular we were. But because we're SEOs and we're clever as hell, we try to think of every possible way we can to manipulate these three concepts for the search engine to skew in our favor. Crawling and discovery, content and relevance, those are typically, those are things that we can control, like 100%, we should be able to control them. The links and the authority is something that we're not really supposed to be able to control, and when we do start manipulating it, Google gets upset and starts penalizing you and things like that. Did that answer your question? Okay, perfect. So we have keywords, there we go. So one of the core strategies that has kind of been like a starting point for every SEO project from inception to nearly present has been keyword research. We need to do keyword research. Now I'm not opposed to the idea that we should be doing keyword research, but I am opposed to the idea that keywords serve as the central point of focus for an SEO strategy. When it was a focus, because at one point in the past, keywords were the central point of focus. You could just stick that keyword, acoustic walls or whatever I said, 100 times on your page. You seemed more relevant. You just make sure it was in your title, in your image alt text, in your image file names, name the file on your server for that particular page with your keyword. And if you did that and you hit all those checkboxes and your competitors didn't, it was fairly easy to gain the relevance portion of the search engine by simply including those keywords over and over. It gave way to some really cool concepts, some that seemed to work for a little while, things like term frequency, inverse document frequency. Has anybody heard of that one? Yes, no? Okay, term frequency, how often does this keyword occur in the body? So you can imagine if there's, as an example, you would look at like the top 10 sites or pages that were ranking for a particular keyword phrase, and then you would identify all of the keywords that occurred and how often they occurred, and if they occurred frequently in every one of these document sets, then you would assume that you needed to have that keyword on your own page as well. And at the same time, if there were keywords on your site that never appeared on anybody else's, you should probably get rid of those. It was a cool concept, and like that idea sort of catalyzed some of the changes that SEOs made in terms of building content relevance. But not necessarily any type of magic number or process that you should focus on. Google has said, I believe directly, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but the term frequency, inverse document frequency is not, it's not a rankings factor. It's not something that is calculated in the algorithm, and if you focus your SEO strategy on this, you're probably going to walk away and be like, man, SEO doesn't work. It's dead, right? And then you're going to write a blog post about it and scare a bunch of people. Keyword density, that's another one of those. Like I remember, when we used to say like, oh, you need to have 10%, 10% of this particular, of your content should have this particular keyword in it. Or we should always have this keyword like every 25 words, every 3 sentences. And like all these magic numbers that were all mostly complete bullshit. But if you did it, it worked. But it didn't sustain because it wasn't really a thing. It just made you seem a little bit better than the people that were out there. And then, as most things are, when SEOs start using a strategy like that in mass, the playing field levels out, Google ups the ante, they change how they're processing things, and suddenly, keyword density is more of a spam factor. Like if you include this keyword more than everybody else, like you're going to look bad because it may become nonsensical, and you're suddenly an outlier. Another one is meta keywords. So, a long time ago, we would stuff meta keywords into every page. Those fields still exist in a lot of content management systems. I still get clients all the time who have on every page of their website, they have the same keywords as their meta keywords. I tell them to delete all of their meta keywords because it doesn't do anything. In fact, Bing has even said that if you use the meta keywords tag, they see it as a spam factor. Like you're more likely to be a spam site if you're using that tag. So those are things that you tend to want to avoid. Other things like we have on the content side, you have doorway pages or glossary pages. I have a client that there's this tool out there, it's called keywordshitter.io. Has anybody heard of that? Yeah? It was really, really awesome. And about 7 or 8 years ago, this particular client ran their main keywords through Keyword Shitter. Basically, you put in a keyword, you hit the start button, and it just shits keywords onto the page, like all of the variants of this keyword, until you say stop. Like it'll keep going forever. I don't know how or why, but I haven't actually tested when does it end, because at some point it's just such a long list, I'm like, I can't go through all of these. So this particular client did this, and then for every single one of these keywords, he handed it off to somebody and said, write me a page. Actually, I think he said, like, write me a few sentences about each of these keywords, and then he created a new page on his site. This client came to me at about 5,000 pages on their site that are variants of the exact same keyword phrase. It worked. Like, you shake your head no, but like at the time, it was great. It was fantastic. Their traffic spiked, they had new sales, everything was going great, and then like 3 or 4 years ago, their traffic started doing this. And it's because that was a terrible strategy for a long-term SEO play. Short-term, worked fantastic. But as Google started to better understand the intent of the user, started doing better at evaluating the quality of content on a page and whether or not it was meeting the intent of the user, they failed miserably because these pages were written they were not written by subject matter experts. They were written by somebody probably on Fiverr, and they lost a whole bunch of traffic. And changing this client's mindset for why that's a terrible idea has been I've had nightmares over this. Like I've told this client, like, please stop doing this. We have to delete like 90% of these pages. It was a waste. And he still dumps money after, dollar after dollar and trying to like bolster this content. And so now I have this huge project on my hands where I've told them, like, stop writing the content. They finally believe me. And so I'm in the process of consolidating 5,000 pages into what will probably be the 10 keywords he put into Keyword Shitter before he hit the go button. So we'll see how that goes. Another big thing that is an SEO strategy that is pretty much dead or dying is this idea that you need to include every bit of content around a particular concept on your site. A classic example of this is the pizza shop down the street, who they make pizza, they deliver pizza, they've got like 10 kinds of pizza, and then you look at their website and they've got this like weird section where they start talking about how pepperoni is made, not their pepperoni, just pepperoni. Like, this is how pepperoni is made, this is a guy who invented pepperoni, these are 12 different kinds of pepperoni, of which we carry none. This is where flour comes from. And so like some SEO somewhere along the line said, if you want your pizza shop to rank better, you need to write about everything there is to know about, you're gonna be the Wikipedia of pizza, and your traffic's gonna skyrocket. And they did get some more traffic out of it. Nobody buying pizza, it's somebody just interested, like, where does pepperoni come from? And then they aren't immediately thinking, like, I'm gonna buy a pizza. So this extra information detracts from the overall intent of this website. So Google's looking at what is the purpose of this website? The purpose of the website is to sell pizza. That's what they want. They want to rank for selling pizza. But now the intent of the website is like informational research, which is not the intent that they were going after. On top of that, there may be some benefit, tangential. There may be some benefit, and that they could potentially do some sort of like resource linking campaign where they get a bunch of links coming in about pepperoni, and then they redirect that to their pepperoni pizza page, and then suddenly rankings skyrocket. It's amazing. Sometimes that worked every once in a while, but generally not. Definitely am not seeing instances of that working today. Glossary pages, then content pages. I mentioned the client who created a page with a snippet for every keyword that this tool popped out. Those types of pages, in this particular case, those are failing. But if you're actually creating like glossary pages, a lot of times those aren't helpful anymore either. Like they were really good at traffic as a KPI, which is a terrible approach to SEO, and probably why a lot of SEOs end up failing. It's because they're trying their hardest to increase more traffic this month than last month, and at what cost, right? Like now I have a bunch of people researching pepperonis, but I'm not selling more pizzas. And so we're missing the intent of why we're creating our content. So content as a strategy is changing to be, for SEO to be successful, it needs to be more aligned with the intent of the user. The glossary pages, I mentioned all these different words on my website, so I created a page with a bunch of glossary keywords because I know that there's search volume around each of those. Those are the types of keywords that the answer is in the search result, and so people aren't clicking. So there's not really a good purpose on doing that unless it's actually a resource that your users are going to use. I had a client that they do energy management consulting. So their clients are like BP, Shell, Texaco, so forth. And they were talking about all kinds of really crazy things, like I don't know, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Like the nuclear energy output for XYZ. And there'll be some like crazy phrase in there. All of their audience knows what that means already. So the idea of creating a glossary for what that keyword means didn't actually do them any service in bringing them new business. It did bring them new traffic, but it didn't bring them any new business. And so when we evaluated the content and whether or not it was actually funneling customers into their pipeline, it was determined that it was 0. So when there's an executive who says, what did you guys do for SEO this month? And you say, we built 100 glossary pages with all these keywords, our traffic went up. And then his next question is, how much money did that give me? And you say 0, they're like, SEO sucks. SEO is dead. Like, I just spent how much money for you to do this, and I got nothing back out of it. So as long as SEOs continue to propagate these types of strategies, we're going to continue to make SEO look bad. And then the concept of you can't compete with like simple knowledge queries, which is like those featured snippets. Link development.
What is a doorway page?
A doorway page? It's a page that exists solely for the purpose of sending a visitor somewhere else. So it may be like an affiliate page, it may be like I created this glossary page, but there's no real value for the user. I'm trying to get them to this other page on my site. So I told them what a pepperoni was, but I really just wanted them to buy my pepperoni pizza. Or I talked about what a pepperoni was, but I really just want them to click and go to Amazon and buy their pepperonis over there so I get some affiliate commission. So they're pages that don't serve any significant purpose to the end user. This is a real website, Link Development Construction Services Limited. I found this trying to find an image for link development, and then I saw this domain name and I thought, who names their link building company this? And then I looked at it, and it's actually a construction company. So I'm assuming their last name's Link or something. I didn't dig into it, but I just thought it was funny. Link building has a pretty sordid history with SEO. At its core, it's one of those most obvious items that SEOs and Google have always butted heads on. And when I say butted heads, I mean Google says don't do it because it screws up their algorithm, and we do it because it screws up their algorithm, typically in our favor. So we've kind of been in this epic battle of whack-a-mole with Google for link development for as long as I've been in the industry. When I first came in, we were using things like XRumor, which is item number 3 there. Don't use it. You can Google it and check it out. But it essentially drops comments on websites with your links in it. So any bulletin board software, any WordPress sites that have open comments, or Blogspot sites, or any of those types of sites, it would go leave a comment and say you have a pretty blog, check out my pepperoni pizzas, and drop a link to your pizza shop. It worked. It was fantastic. You could turn this thing on, and the next day you had rankings. It was incredible. And then fast forward 2 years, and you have no rankings because Google has determined that they can spot this sort of strategy, and then they penalized every site that did it. And so link building has always sort of followed this pattern of we try something like this, and then Google figures it out, and they're like, okay, well, what if instead of putting it in the comments, we put it in the blog post itself? And so now we can just pay all these bloggers with a service like Blogsvertise to write really stupid articles that probably don't make sense and drop in buy pepperoni pizza here. So now we're paying somebody to write where pepperoni comes from and then link back to our website so that we rank better for pepperoni pizzas. That is dead. Press releases for links, that was a pretty common strategy. That is dead. You should still do press releases. There's a good reason to do that for your business. You should do press releases. But dropping keyword-friendly anchor text back to your website, those types of things are only going to get you in trouble, and they're going to lead somebody to believe that SEO is dead or worse, that SEO can actually hurt your site, which if done improperly, it certainly can do so. And the number 4 is press releases, which is the same as number 1. I don't know why I did that. So there are lots of different types of strategies for link building, and I'll cover a couple in a minute that you can use that won't get you in trouble. But generally speaking, if you feel like I could do something really simple or easy and get a link, and it doesn't involve making a friend, like an actual true relationship or providing an actual resource, then you're probably doing it in a way that's going to come back and bite you a little bit later. In 2012, Google launched an algorithm called the Penguin algorithm update. It rolled in cycles or whatever, but it essentially went through and just removed or devalued all of your links and then penalized your site. So like suddenly you just didn't appear for any of those keywords that you were actually trying to rank for. So like maybe you naturally were in position 10 and then you hired a crappy SEO who built a bunch of links and got you to number 2, but now you're off the face of the map. And you had to go back through a process of asking all of those webmasters to remove their links, and you have to disavow the links, and basically undo all of that work you had just done just to try to get to a point where you could start to grow again. So that's another reason why a lot of people think SEO is dead, because they use strategies that don't work or get you in trouble. So, a couple of facts. Actually, anybody have any questions or any ideas or strategies that they're using now that they want to just kind of ping, like, hey, is this something that is effective? I won't laugh at you if it's bad. No? Okay, fair enough. So, fact. This is a fact. Better optimized sites get more traffic. Right, so if it's a pretty basic and simple concept, but if we're saying that SEO is dead, then the idea would be that if you optimize your website, it doesn't do anything. But all of the data shows that if you optimize your website, you're going to get more traffic and more visitors. So kind of at the core, like how is Google discovering our site? Pages that aren't crawled don't get traffic. We see things like internal linking make a really big difference. Rest in peace to the idea of internal no follows. There's a lot of different ways that we can try to encourage the search engines to discover more of our content, which is that foundation, basic level of SEO that we have to accomplish. One of the things that we use, yes?
On content, I read, is there a minimum, maximum amount of words, or is that just go where we want?
There is no magic number. So there is some logic that you can apply. So like, for example, if it is a complex topic that is a research-based idea, like you probably need like 1,000 or 2,000 words to really demonstrate that you're an authority on that particular subject. If you have, like we're talking about, quantum physics or the theory of relativity, and you've got, 50 words on the page, like you're not going to rank for that. I mean, unless you have enough links, different story. But you're generally not going to rank for that because you haven't covered the subject matter better than everybody else who's written on that same topic. It doesn't necessarily have to be more words than everybody else, but like from an algorithmic standpoint, there can be like some, there's also like the reading level assessments and things like that for the content. So if it's a complex subject, it should probably be written, at a college reading level as opposed to an elementary reading level, things like that. Good question though. I would say as a general rule of thumb for myself, I typically tell clients that they need to have, at a minimum, like 250 to 500 words on a page. Well, actually, one of the Botify, which is a tool that I often use, sorry, Deep Crawl, who sponsors this event. One of the reports that they have assesses the level of template in your website versus the percentage of unique content. So they look at every page kind of like a block level and identify like this is like a menu. So like this doesn't count for what's unique on the page. This is a call to action or a footer or those types of things that exist on every page. Or between like maybe 5 pages, if you have like the same videos and excerpts, or a product page, for example, like where the only thing that may be different is a price, a picture, and 10 words. It'll show you like 90% of this page is a template that exists on every other page. So you might want to increase the uniqueness of content on that page so that it appears to be more relevant, more important, and it's not just something where you copied and pasted a feed of short snippets of information. Does that make sense? Okay. IO serious thank you to J.R. Oaks, who I don't think is here tonight. He introduced me to Botify about 2 years ago, and I love this tool. Like it's expensive. I think they start out at like $2,500 a month for the tool, but it covers a number of different things. It starts off, the platform does like a full crawl of the website. They consume your log files, so you ship your log files to them, and then they start matching up things, which I'll show you a couple graphs in a minute, looking at what percentage of your site does Google crawl, how frequently does it crawl those pages, are they spending a lot of time crawling pages that get no traffic, and those types of things. They have the content analysis as part of the platform, which is kind of what I was talking about, and evaluating what percentage of the page is a template versus not a template. And then they also marry your search analytics data, like Google Search Console search analytics, as well as Google Analytics data, to help you segment and overlay like the keywords and traffic with crawl data, which can be incredibly helpful. Some of the things that they can pull, like for example, they'll flag things like these pages have high impressions and front page rankings for these particular keywords, but those keywords don't appear in the body. They don't appear in the title, they don't appear in the description, and things like that. So you can kind of quickly tackle some areas where there's just like low-hanging fruit of like, oh, I'm ranking for this keyword almost, but I don't even have that keyword on the page. And believe it or not, that's a pretty high running problem. I have a client who wanted to rank for PCB design, and in evaluating their homepage, I discovered that they never anywhere said PCB design on the page. And strangely, it's taken a lot of work, and I don't know that it's there really either still. Thank you, red tape. A couple of things that we can see, like this is an example of some data for a client that we were working with using Botify. So we can see here, this was between I think February and June or something like that, or February and July. We're looking at the percentage of URLs crawled at each page level. So they're crawling the site, they can see how deep into the site a page is. Does it take 1 click, 2 clicks, 3 clicks, 4 clicks, 5 clicks, and so forth to get to that particular page? And is Google crawling more or less of those pages in that area? So the red means that it was only crawled by Botify. So essentially, this crawler went through my site and found all these pages. Google hasn't visited those pages. So like here, we can see like, this is current, yeah. So here we can see like at crawl depth of like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus, before, very little of those pages were ever getting crawled by Google. Most of them were discoverable when we ran a crawl, and they were, like for example, those 4,000 pages of crossed that Google just never came back and visited because they knew they were worthless. There may be other like internal linking issues that cause, like if you can only access products once you get to page 9, and this you have no change in sorting depending on the categories that you're looking at for an e-com site. It may be that some products are always buried 9, 10 clicks deep. Obviously, doesn't show any level of priority for those particular products. And so we did some work with this client to restructure how their category pages worked. So what we did is we took, like on their category page, we had some selections of subcategories, and we seeded those on the main. So this was a golf client, and so they had like golf clubs, and their golf clubs page just had a list of every golf club that they offered. That was it. It was, if you want a golf club, you just scroll through page 900, and you might find the one that you want. And so it took us some bit of doing, again, politics, but we were able to get them to add some shortcuts in a UX-friendly manner at the top of their category pages. We call them hybrid product display pages. That was like, for golf drivers, or for men's clubs, or for left-handed clubs, things that would normally be difficult for the search engine to find. And we seeded these at the top of every category page with links to a subcategory. They also had faceted navigation, which was impossible for Google to traverse. So, does everybody know what faceted navigation is? Okay. So when you're on like an e-com site, in the navigation, there'll typically be things like, filter by brand, or filter by size, or sometimes it's like filter by category. In this case, for this client, all of those things, right? So the only way you could get to a left-handed golf club was to go to the golf clubs page, and then in the faceted navigation on the left, pick this like club type, and then choose left-handed, and then the page itself changed to show left-handed golf clubs, but there was not a new URL that Google could crawl, and there was no other way to get to those pages. So for the client, they had always seen like, oh, getting to my left-handed golf clubs is easy. You just go to golf clubs, left-handed golf clubs, done. For Google, it was, I go to golf clubs and then I scroll through all of these pages until I find a left-handed golf club, and then once I'm there, maybe there is a link in the breadcrumbs, like the left-handed golf clubs page. So by adding these subcategories, we were able to significantly increase the percentage of pages that were frequently crawled by Google at the full depth of the site. So instead of being a full trail like this, now we've got, and there's like an oddity with page 5, which I think we're still trying to figure out. I don't know, Jeff, did we ever figure that out?
It was, yeah, it was different types. It was some of those pre-faceted searches that the queries were put in.
Okay.
And it just happened to be a certain mix.
Yeah, just like, oh no, it was the pagination in the bottom.
Yeah.
It was like, they have like a static like page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. And so like on the first page for all of these, there was like links, but like page 5 somehow always got skipped. So this is an issue that we're trying to resolve. Discovered because we had Botify, we have this crawl data, and we can see that this issue exists and try to solve it. Again, coming back to the core knowledge that if Google's not crawling the page, it's not ranking. And so we can use this type of data to influence that. Another example, this is their, we were able to kind of like break down, in Botify you can have like these particular segments. So you can say like, in this case, like these are accessories, this is their blog, this is golf apparel, golf clubs, and so forth. You can see in February, this is the number of crawled URLs, and again, this is active URLs on Google, so that means Google's actively crawling them, versus not active URLs on Google, Active URLs in Google in this case means that the page is actually getting traffic. And then not active URLs on Google means that Google has crawled that page, but it's not actively getting traffic to it, or it's not getting traffic. So in this case, like because we used the tool and we made some changes towards increasing authority to pages deeper in the site. So when we modified the structure, not only do we encourage Google to revisit those pages more often, but it also passed more authority more quickly to like individual product pages, which is what we're looking at here. And so we can see now a much higher percentage of our golf club pages are actually receiving traffic than before. So before it was just like a small fraction of what Google had discovered were actually getting any traffic. And we were able to change that. And again, we were able to monitor this using a tool like Botify, so that we could then justify like all these things that you're spending for dev resources are actually having an impact. Last one of these kinds of graphs, this was call frequency. So you can see in February, there's like a little bitty, itsy bitsy, I think, sliver of green in here that you can't see. It's probably their homepage. It's a number of times that Google was crawling that particular, or like any specific page on the site. So in this case, what percentage of the site was Google crawling it? 80% of the time. So it was based on the number of pages, or the number of days in the month, what percentage of days Google crawled that particular site. So for 80% of the month, was this page crawled again, or was it only crawled like one day out of the month, would be 1/30 kind of thing. And so we can see as time progressed, between February and March, just making some of these quick changes, we were able to suddenly get 12% of the site is being crawled 80% of the time. And then currently, I think this is again is like June or July, nearly 30% of the site is crawled 80% of the time. So 8 out of 10 days, this page is getting hit by Google, whereas before we were less than 1 on every single page. Or was it 20 to 79% was like our biggest bucket, and then we had 50% of our pages were never crawled. So an entire month, Google wouldn't even see half of our site. We could have improved and changed 50% of our site, Google wouldn't even know it because they weren't coming. So this saw an obvious lift of traffic, February, March, and June. We can see this is year over year, so you can see that gap widening. Just as we made these changes, Google was able to better crawl these pages, then we immediately saw gains in traffic. Another really cool tool, if you can't afford Botify, because it does a lot of really amazing things, is Content King, and I owe this one to Patrick Stocks, who's sitting in the back of the room. Thank you, Patrick. I have now implemented Content King on all of my clients, even those that I pay for Botify. This platform does persistent crawling of your site. So it is pretending to be Google and revisiting all of your pages based upon how important it feels they are. So like how you've internally linked is how frequently it's crawling those pages. But most importantly, it has the ability to segment pages by any crazy number of searches that you want. So you could, once it crawls a page, how many of you have ever used Screaming Frog? Okay. Screaming Frog is a desktop-based crawler. You put in your domain name, and it starts at your home page, finds a link, crawls that page, finds another link, crawls that page, and it extracts your title, your description, how many words are on the page, how long it takes, your H1s, images, and all that sort of stuff. Canonical tags, status codes, and everything that a technical SEO would want to start looking at. Content King does that, but instead of having it loaded in your desktop and hit the start button and you get it once, it's doing it all the time. And you can do really cool things like, I want a list of every page on my site that takes more than 700 milliseconds to load. You can create a bucket for those and start to see like how many of these have title problems, how many of these have image problems, or whether it's site speed that you're bucketing by, or you could say, I want to look at all of the pages that have no meta description, and then you can see that segment shrinking obviously as you go over time improving it, and it sends you alerts when things change. This has been paid for itself over and over and over again for me. Clients, either they add new content to their site, when Content King finds a new page, I get an email that says, hey, we found 20 new pages on your site. And I click a little button and I can see exactly what 20 pages were just added and what all their SEO information is. If the title tags change, I get an email and I can see what the old title was and what the new title was. So if a client goes rogue, I can spot it before something goes wrong. Where it starts to pay for itself is when you get alerts for things like your robots.txt file, and you see like, we're blocking robots, or we're blocking Google with robots, and now I get an alert within an hour, sometimes generally faster than that, of it going live, whereas before it was like, I went and looked at the site every couple of days, or looked in Google Analytics, and analytics would go like this, and then I'm asking myself why that just happened. We had another client that implemented a meta tag, a no index meta tag across a section of their website. It would have taken me forever probably to figure that out, but I was able to figure it out in like an hour and a half because I got one of these alerts and I started finding a pattern associated with it. So as an SEO, this tool is invaluable to me, and I highly recommend everybody use it. Another concept in terms of like how we allow for discovery. This one is a little bit interesting. I'd asked John Mueller if a site would ever be penalized for routing Google to a specific server that had better performance. So I have some clients that have servers that struggle at different times of the day and things like that. A totally separate problem that they should be solving. But what I was trying to figure out is if I took a clone, basically a cached clone of my website, and threw it on a high-performance server, would Google ever be upset that I was sending Google only to this server that would just be just for Google, that would perform significantly faster and create a much faster experience? And John said, hey, that's fine. Serving users from a local server is a common setup. The takeaway from this is that Google is a user. So anytime you're thinking about what changes that you can make to your site to improve your user experience, as an SEO, we should be looking at what changes can we make to our site to improve Google's experience as a user. Any questions? Yes?
Maybe I'm not understanding, or so you're saying that you would filter specifically Googlebot only to a separate server and all other traffic to the default server?
In this particular case, yes. And the reason was is the client had a really shitty server, and they couldn't change it because it was database driven, and they wouldn't optimize the database, and it's gonna take like 6 months, because they would have to re-architect everything. They didn't have a lot of resources. And so I was trying to figure out whether or not I could just pull a cache of their site and throw that on a different server and just serve it static, and only send Googlebot to that one, because you couldn't actually check out or anything like that, because they were just static pages.
Yeah, I think in his reply, I would presume that he thinks that you are referring to the typical version of load balancing, where you would send a proportion of traffic to a couple of different servers, and Googlebot may be one of those, as opposed to a filter that specifically only sends Googlebot to.
Yeah, he totally may have meant that.
Yeah.
But I interpreted it how I wanted, and I did it. and it didn't cause a problem.
Yeah.
But you
So-
know now.
Well, now we fixed it. So it was a temporary thing. I just wanted him. Their site speed was like 10 seconds to load a page, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. I wanted to load a page, in a reasonable time, and they apparently couldn't accomplish it. So scraped the site, created cache static HTML files, served those to Google. Rankings improved just on the performance base. That was the only change we made. It made for a little bit of a maintenance nightmare because we had to recache it like after we made certain changes, and inventory catalogs changed, blah blah blah. It's not a strategy I would recommend, but it's a concept to think about as an SEO. Like, how can I do things to be better for Google, and that is encouraged. Yes, sir.
As an example, let's say I own Tony's Pizza and I sell pizza.
Okay.
I have an 8-page website, but I really don't know anything about Google bots, SEO, any of that, and I just completely ignore it. I just write, I have great pizza, I have great rigatoni, our service is good, da, 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 da. So what would that effect be on ranking? Would it just never show up ever because it's not SEO?
It depends on your competition, right? So I mean, if all of the other pizza places around you are doing a better job, like they have their titles defined, and their sites are mobile friendly and those types of things, and because you just went to Wix and threw up something, fun, as long as they did the same thing, you stand a pretty decent chance. But if they have an SEO or somebody knowledgeable, kind of even just getting their basics in place, and you don't have that, then unless you've got a lot of off-site like authority metrics that make you look great, like people are going into maps and they're leaving you lots of reviews, and they're talking about your pizza, and all of these other like Yelp, and you've got listings in Grubhub and like those kinds of things happening that show like you're a legitimate business and people love you. Then you can overcome some of those things. But once the space starts to get competitive, then you start to have to hit all of these things in order to win.
So I think an important thing there also, so you mentioned competition, right? So you have to think of your area for a local business, like with pizza, Domino's, Papa John's, all the major chains
are doing this.
SEO. So you've lost 3 spots minimum, unless there's 2 Domino's in your neighborhood. If there's 4, 5, at least 5 potential spots, maybe a map listing. So like it really does depend on the competition and who the competitors are.
Got it. So a version of this, whatever you decide, is going to be a big advantage for a pizza company, right? They have to compete.
Yes.
So they need to do SEO.
Right. If you want to be found in search, you need to meet the standards that the search engine requires in order to rank you. And if you don't meet that, just hope that your competitors meet it less than you do. You'll be fine.
How do you define authority, and is there a difference in pages, internal pages, authority, and can you see that, is there a tool, I used Boz authority, but I didn't quite understand what that one was.
Yeah, I'll talk about links in a minute, and I'll come back to your question.
Okay.
Keywords, just a couple of highlights I want to make. Leverage featured snippets to your advantage. So when I'm looking at keywords, again, like there's some of the obvious. Like I want to look at what is being done in paid search, identify what keywords are performing well there, so I make sure that I at least have pages, that hit the concept of the keywords that are successful in paid. A lot of times I'll leverage the ad copy and description that's winning in paid and use that to optimize like the titles and descriptions for my SEO pages. There's a couple of like features or tools that I often use as well. One of them is the UX on this tool is terrible. It is incredibly slow, but it does a really good job of pulling the data, and then I pull it out and play with it elsewhere. So this is called Featured Snippet Tool. It's made by Internet Marketing Ninjas, who's one of my competitors, but I love the Jim Boykin and the guys over there. This tool, essentially you put in your domain name, and it goes through and pulls all the keywords for which your site ranks, and then evaluates each of them to determine, is there a featured snippet, is there a video, there's a couple of other things, like there's FAQs and things like that that show up for it. And then it starts to bucket them into groups for you, like in this particular page, we own one featured snippet. There's 41 people also ask results that show up for that particular page, and the results where that page appears. There's 9 snippets, there's 66 phrases, 2 low-hanging fruit, so those are keywords for which I rank in the top 3. I don't have the featured snippet. And maybe there's like low competition. So like maybe if I just tweak my content a little bit, I could take that featured snippet, and then it assigns a value. So it says, if I were to win all of these things, I'm essentially getting myself $6,300 a month in organic traffic. That's what you would have to pay in AdWords to get the traffic that's expected there. So this tool is really, really good at just servicing those. I always export it and dump it into a pivot table so that I can see like a list for each URL. I can quickly see what are all of the keywords that would apply. So like this page has these 4 keywords. The search feature that exists as a paragraph with an image. So I can send this immediately over to like my content writer and say like, hey, make sure that we have images on this page, and here are some keywords. Make sure, ideally, maybe we have images about those keywords. In this case, like maybe it's like a PCB data management as paragraph with an image. So like maybe we should have a screenshot of our data management platform on that page while we describe what PCB data management is or what purpose it serves. And then we're more likely to take that featured snippet. And then you can quickly see like for that particular keyword, there's 50 visits a month, and it's worth roughly $17 if I can get that. So it kind of helps in prioritizing what types of featured snippets you should go after and what keywords are out there. Really helpful if you already have traffic and rankings. I also will dump my competitors into this tool so I can see kind of what is deemed to be low-hanging fruit for them, especially if I'm the vulnerable one. So if I'm the one that's ranking, then I know like if they run this tool, they're probably going to come after me for those particular keywords. Another one I look at is people also search for. So like when you're doing a search, you get like this listing of people also search, and there are keyword phrases like this is a company that we work with. They have a product called Altium Designer. So I do a search for Altium Designer, and then I look what are the keywords in that people also search for box, and then I look at the results for those because people are probably going to click on those and go to the result and then learn more. So in this case, like Altium Designer tutorial is one of the top ones. I'm like, hey, what shows up there? Believe it or not, for our client, Altium Designer tutorial, the first result, we've got this result up at the top, but then there was a bunch of videos. It scrolls way too fast. Back up there. So there's a bunch of videos. None of them are my client. And so I went back to the client. I was like, hey, listen, people are doing searches for tutorials on how to use your software, and there's videos out there on how to use your software. And then when I look at their actual page, there's no video on it. They don't have any videos on how to use their own software. So like everybody else is creating this and basically taking traffic that we would want to own. So it's a somewhat manual process, but it's especially for smaller SEO projects, it's a really helpful way to kind of identify missed opportunities. For content, the key takeaways, and these are things that don't change, like make the content more relevant to the topic. Like don't try to focus on a keyword, focus on making it relevant to the topic. I mentioned optimizing your titles and descriptions using ad copy. Have content that's focused on the user journey. This is one that is often missed. Is like as an SEO, one of the first things that you should do is talk with your client about what are the pain points you're solving for your client. So pain point is I'm starving and I want a pizza right now. So a good piece of content might be how quickly we get you your pizzas, right? Like, maybe not the most appropriate example, but like you need to think in that mindset. So for a client like this software, like one of the biggest pain points their clients have is that the competitor software is so expensive. So like having a piece of content where we compare the prices of software, talk about how we're a lower cost alternative, like those are the types of concepts that should be driving your keyword strategy, not dumping your keywords in keyword shitter and handing it off to somebody to write a bunch of thin pages. And then actually focusing on having better content. There's a couple of tools. Market Muse is a really great one. If you haven't heard of it, basically assigns like a score for topical authority and starts to give you particular keywords and comparisons. So you can see like, if I wanted to rank for craft beer, I can see that for my site versus who ranks in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what our overall content score is, and then some ideas on topics that are being covered in those pages, and where where each of those keywords fall in. So I can see for craft beer, not very many people talk about craft beer news. A little bit more talk about the ingredients. Most of them are talking about American craft beer, the sites that rank. So if I'm going to talk about craft beer and I want to rank for it, this quickly tells me like I should probably be discussing the topic of American craft beer on my site. It's not term frequency inverse document frequency. It's using a different model for topical relevance, things like latent or Schley allocation and stuff like that. But in general, it's a fantastic tool that you should consider using. On the link building side, this is the quote I was talking about. It was Larry Page, and he said, turns out people who win Nobel Prizes have citations from 10,000 different papers, and which means that other people thought that your work was important because they thought it was worth mentioning. And that's kind of the concept behind links and why links are important and how you get authority from links. So we know as SEOs, sites with better links typically rank better. The links that are more focused on adding context and being a resource and have referral traffic are going to be more valuable links than those that are just randomly placed in comments or in blog posts on sites that are irrelevant. Some of the strategies that we use are a few things that we'll look at is like competitor link apps. So we'll look at, Ahrefs has a really cool tool, I think it's called Domain Intersect, where you dump in your domain and several of your competitors, and then it'll show you, here are all of the links that are pointing to those sites that you don't have, which gives you like a pretty quick list of places that you should consider trying to get a link from. Use your brain. Sometimes your competitors get links from spam sites. That doesn't mean that you should follow in their footsteps. But you might see some like really cool resources. Like we had a client who does PCB design, and all of their competitors had articles on Circuit Digest, which is a really great resource in the industry for printed circuit boards. They didn't have one. So then we were like, okay, we need to reach out to Circuit Digest and figure out what kind of partnership we can put in place in order to get a link from them as well. It's valuable. It adds, adds value to their users to discover us, and it's the type of audience that we're wanting to attract. Another really easy one is Recovery 404s. Again, Ahrefs has a really easy tool for this, where you put in your domain name and then you can, typically I go to the top pages by links, and then filter where the status code is 404, and that basically shows you all of the pages on your site that don't exist that have links pointing back to them. It's really helpful, like if you've ever re-platformed your site, changed structures, that type of thing. As a quick way, you can either redirect those pages or resurrect those pages to reclaim that lost link equity. So to your question about authority metrics, so we don't really know, like PageRank, is a measure of what the authority is. Moz has domain authority. Ahrefs has their trust, I think their trust rank, something like that. Majestic has their own. SEMrush has their own. So like all these different platforms have a value that they try to assign for pages and sites and the authority that they have. It's not something where I think you can ever legitimately say, like, does this one page on my site that I want to rank have equal authority to this other page that I see ranking? Because links are different, they're aged differently, they come from different sources. They have different intents behind them. And ultimately, it is not who has more, which is what most of these third-party tools offer, is like an evaluation of who has more. It's going to be who has better. And you also have no idea what percentage of their link profiles have been disavowed. Things like Ahrefs is probably one of the better ones, but they also don't necessarily have an entire crawl of the full web. So like their index isn't Google's index. And so Google may not see half the links they do, or Google may see twice as many as what they do. So there's not really a tool for doing that. Some things like Botify and even Content King give you like an internal authority metric to show you like how important that page appears to be on your site based off of the number of internal links that you have. So that'll give you a good idea like how you're portraying the value of different pages and which ones you think are most important based off of your internal linking structures. But as far as external links to pages, I mean, probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I stopped caring about how many links to which specific page of my site, because Google also started swapping the results. So like maybe your homepage is the one that has all of the authority, but if they saw an internal page was more relevant to the query, they would swap that and show the internal page in the search results. And so you would go and look and be like, oh, this page has no links, but it's ranking above my homepage that has 100,000 links, when in reality it was a different page on their site that contributed the authority metric for it to rank. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a pain.
It is a pain. It is a pain, but not necessarily something that I would encourage you to, unless that's your model. I would invest a lot of time focusing on that, because you'll just waste a lot of time.
I think one of the reasons I'm here is where to focus or where not to focus. I mean, that's because you can't focus on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest takeaways would be, focus first on making sure Google can discover everything. Because if that's not done, then your any other work you're going to do is never going to get seen. And then focus on making sure your content is relevant and meets the intent of the user that you're trying to target. And like if you focus on those things and do that really well, then some of the link building strategies, you can get creative. Whether it's looking at competitor link gap, whether it's identifying I have a client that does medical ID jewelry. And so one of the recommendations that we've made to them is to go to all of the conferences about like diabetes or like the walks. So we talk like all the 5Ks about diabetes, like go sponsor them. And like maybe you'll get links back from those sites, as a sponsor of JDRF, which is the Juvenile Diabetes program that does the 5K. If you get a link from them, then you're more relevant to that keyword when you're trying to rank for a diabetes medical ID bracelet. It's a little bit of a stretch, but those are the kinds of creative solutions that you can start to get into place.
How many tags does Google have now? Is there a Google Analytics tag? What tag do you need to be in there? Because I've heard now that there's 6 different, Google's trying to offer 6 different, for Adwords, for this, for that.
Oh, for the links? Yeah, don't worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. It's a red herring for you. Don't. It is something for, if you're a publisher, then it kind of becomes important. Like, imagine that you're Forbes. Like some of these publishers went through and no-followed all the links coming out of their website because it was a problem. And so there's some legitimate link value that should be getting passed from an editorial site or a newspaper. Like if the New York Times or Washington Post links to you and it's relevant, then it should pass authority to you because you're getting a legitimate citation.
Oh, no, that's not the question I'm asking. Maybe I'm not asking it right. In the Google console, which I'm having a little bit of, you have the Google tag. I've heard that there's 6 different tags that you can put into your header now.
You mean ways to claim it? Ways
Yeah.
to claim it?
No, 6 different.
I mean,
it's Google
like a
tag.
canonical tag and a title tag?
No, the one that's 100 letters long and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's just a verification code just to prove that you own the
We only
domain.
need the one verification code.
I mean, you need one for every person that's trying to be an owner for your site if
Yeah,
it's not
okay.
a delegated ownership. Yeah. But that would have absolutely no impact on your SEO other than the knowledge you would glean from Search Console.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, guys, that's it. This is how you increase your rankings in a search engine. So it's actually not. I've got like a few more points, and I appreciate the premature applause. I should just close right now. I'm guessing. So I did want to leave a couple of like really important ideas for you to think about. You know, SEO is dead if you're trying to bullshit your way through it. You know, search traffic's kind of like a 401k. You invest in it over time. You look for trending growth. You reinvest. There's going to be ups and downs along the way. You know, it's about, you know, there's two different approaches. You can amplify, you know, an authority if it already exists, or you have to establish an authority, and it's two different approaches that you're going to take if you're a startup business versus if you're an established business trying to build your customer base. And like you treat your SEO strategy similarly, and that it's about identifying what assets you have and then how you can build off of those. When I started putting this presentation together, I decided not to do it because some people that I kind of like ended up in the mix, including myself. You know, there's a lot of disinformation out there. So like I have blog posts that I've written that were like, you know, 8 years ago that talked about, you know, getting blog links and how great it was, because it was, but it's not anymore. And so I think one of the biggest reasons why SEO is often proclaimed as dead is because it's really easy to find bad information or old information. And there's a lot of strategies that have worked in the past that don't work now. So it wasn't bad advice 10 years ago, but it's really bad advice now. So it's important that when you're implementing or looking at SEO strategies, you know, you're doing your homework to figure out, is this timely? When was this post written? Do your own like Google Trends search on that particular concept and see if it's something that's increasing. You know, SEO is not gaming a mediocre website to the top of the search results. You know, sometimes SEO has to start with actually fixing, you know, a product or customer experience. You know, you can't have, if you want to keep your job as an SEO, you have to drive the business to be better. Because if your product or service or site sucks, ranking #1 isn't going to fix it. It's just going to cause you to disappoint a lot more people than you would have before. You know, a case in point, you know, people start searching your name and they see terrible reviews, and then they're not going to pick you. So if you want to be effective in SEO, you have to have foresight, you have to be able to adapt. Moz did a post, I can't remember when, but they basically said that 78% of search results have some rankings change every day. So day to day, 78% of all the result sets that they looked at were somewhat different. Everything in SEO is constantly changing. You get new competitors, the algorithm changes, the technology changes, but if you focus on these things that we've talked about in those core pillars of SEO, like discovery, content relevance, and authority, you should be able to sustain success. And you need to make sure that you avoid things that look like they're going to be some sort of short-term win unless you've validated it with another person. Know that SEO is not just Google. You know, SEO strategies are typically focused on undermining Google's ability to present the best answer to the users, because you think yours is the best, so you present that to the search engine, and you're trying to trick Google into thinking like you're better than everybody else, despite what they think. And so this epic battle of algorithm versus opportunist, you know, has been raging, will always rage on, and anytime we create a technique that becomes, you know, gets mass adoption, or re-levels a playing field, it suddenly becomes ineffective, or it becomes like a basic element that everybody has to have. So suffice to say, your SEO might be dead, but if it is, it's because you're doing it wrong. And if you still think SEO is dead, then I highly encourage you to just put this tag on your site. It'll work 100% at proving how little you care about organic rankings by telling Google to beat it. Now I'm done.
All right, so thanks everyone for coming out. The way that we usually wrap things up is with a little ride over to Rookies. If anybody wants to join the group for a drink over there. and then hang out, exchange business cards, ask questions, fun stuff like that. Anybody interested? So nobody shows up alone. We've got at least 1 or 2 people going over, 3 or 4. All right. It's like a couple traffic lights up from here. Thank you very much for coming out, and thank you, Jake.
Thank you all for participating. It's so much less awkward when you get feedback. Way to go. Thank you.
Did he say he has slides anywhere in this first? I thought those slides available anywhere.
Oh, you know, I give it as well.
Video. Somebody told me that there was something left up there.
You know what, I think that I took one.
Start to leaving, my shirt's like freaks you out.